Joining us now is Congressman Randy Forbes, member of the House Armed Services and Judiciary Committees. Congressman, your reaction, if you would, to the Pentagon spokesman when asked yesterday if Secretary Hagel supported the Army quarantine policy issued by General Odierno. Take a listen, if you would.
The Secretary supports the decision that was made for General Williams and his team. He's not going to oppose at this time the decision made by Army leadership for all soldiers.
That's seemingly a slap at the Joint Chiefs before implementing his recommendation, Congressman. Your reaction to it?
Well, Lou, as you know, I will criticize the Secretary of Defense when I think it's appropriate, but in this particular situation, I think he's doing the right thing to follow the recommendations of his military officers for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's important that we listen to the military advice that he's been given, unlike what the president's been doing. But the second thing is, I think the protection and safety of those troops has to be foremost for him and in front of every decision he makes. I also don't disapprove of him relooking this policy 45 days down the road if the military officers come back and say they want to revise it. But it just shows how very concerned these military leaders are about the Ebola virus.
They're concerned, but this also contrasts to the first iteration of that expression of concern. The military saying there'd be a 10-day quarantine. I think you know on this broadcast, I said very clearly, this is outrageous. When the World Health Organization calls for a 42-day quarantine, and physicians say 21, and the military's initial reaction, or at the orders of the civilian leadership, said 10 days. This has migrated to this point, and as you said, as we've said here, why in the world would not the concern about the well-being of our troops always be foremost in the minds of both parties, the White House, the Congress, the Pentagon?
Well, Lou, it should be, and I think one of the things that you point up absolutely correctly is the absence of an overall strategy to deal with the Ebola virus overall, just like we've seen an absence of strategy that this administration has had in dealing with foreign policy or other domestic concerns that we've had since they've been in office.
And, Congressman, as we look at what is happening now with another 1,000 troops going to West Africa, at a time when this administration is cutting, slashing our military, and doing so with, it seems, almost glee, not reluctance and not forbearance. Why in the world should the American people not be outraged at what is happening?
Well, Lou, I don't know why they're not outraged, because I'm outraged, because as you and I have talked about before, the cuts this administration has placed upon the military has put us in incredibly difficult situations in defending the country around the globe. And yet every time there is something that needs to be done, this administration looks to the military and says, do it. And I think what you're finding now is the American people, our allies across the globe, they don't have very much confidence in this administration, either that they're telling them the truth, they're telling them what's accurate, or that they have a strategy for dealing with these issues, whether it's ISIS or whether it's Ebola or whether it's any of the other major things that the United States is confronting across the globe.
11 states now, and most recently California, joining in with quarantine standards and protocols of their own, far more stringent than that of the Obama administration and the CDC. The Pentagon having to assert itself, and I want to just say out loud, my congratulations to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, the general, standing up and saying this is the way it's going to be, General Odierno as well. I mean, this is a direct conflict between the Pentagon and the civilian leadership, if not the president himself. How does it resolve?
Well, Lou, I think a couple of things. First of all, I'm glad, as you mentioned, that the chairman is speaking up and that the military leadership is expressing their concern. But I've also called for Congress. I think we should have been back in session. I think we can't wait on this. I think when you have an administration that fails to develop strategies like this, then it falls on Congress to do it. And I'm just hoping we'll come back in sooner rather than later so that we can help create the strategy. I'm not confident we're going to see it from the administration, but I certainly am grateful that the military leadership is stepping up to the plate and saying they're going to protect their troops, which is, both of us agree, is the first fundamental obligation that they have.
Congressman, thank you so much, as always, for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lou.